Hey guys, how's it going? Value Venture Investing here today. So today we're going to be talking about space. Virgin Galactic, of course, recently here they released their Q2 2020 results. The stock just tanked after. It's been going down ever since. As of recording this, it's down again, and I actually think I know why, and it's a reason that I don't think a lot of people are talking about. Maybe nobody's noticed it or not. So be sure, if you're an investor or you're thinking of investing or you're just interested, be sure to stick around for when we talk about this, because I'd love to know your guys' opinion. In my opinion, I think this is why the stock is going down. So today we're going to go over the quick top line items. We're not going to spend a huge time on this video like we did on the last time going through the presentation, because there's some interesting stuff in there as well. And I also listened to the conference call. I'm going to give you some insights into what I got there. So of course, the big top line item was there was zero revenue. On the conference call, they were saying they were focusing basically on their goal and their mission. So I think that's, obviously a pretty negative thing, but this is a growth company. But if you compare it to last quarter, I have in green here Q1, so this Q1 2020, that was last quarter. And then they also compare quite often to the year over year, so Q1 2019. $0 in revenue, whereas last quarter they had 238,000. And of course, Q1 2019 they had 638,000. So that's steadily been on a decline. Of course, a lot of these were kind of government contract sorts of things, so obviously they're not making any money off what they're doing right now. But still, you can expect, of course, that I suppose. Net income was negative $63 million. It's $3 million worse than it was last quarter. Of course, they have all these capital expenditures and zero revenue. Compared to a year over year, it was $44 million loss. So again, that's getting worse as well. That's something that's not going to help the stock. In terms of cash, they got to have a strong cash position. They exited the quarter with $360 million in cash. Last quarter, they had $419 million. So, and going back year over year, I actually can't even get that information. So this is something that's very important, and that's probably why that they're going to do a dilution here, a cash raise, but we'll talk about that. So, that could be inferred as a negative, but I don't think anybody ever, I think everybody expected that. We'll get to this one later. So those were the main things, the main numbers. You might not see them anywhere else laid out like this. Sometimes you have to shuffle through the financial statements. So I thought I'd give that to you guys because it's really helpful to look at it that way. So now let's quickly look through their presentation and give you some insights there. Of course, one of the first slides here is we saw Michael here. He's going to be the new CEO. And he was actually, most recently the president and the managing director of Disney Parks International. So he seems like a good guy for the job. Why did they bring him? And they put George Whiteshields into the new role of the chief space officer. I think it's a good thing. I don't know if there's some internal struggle there or not, but it's definitely something that was notable that a lot of people aren't talking about. So the recent milestones, so the flight test program, of course we talked about this first one in my last video, the successful test flights from Spaceport America. They've also had FAA approval process. We'll get a little bit more into that as well. They also have the orbital human spaceflight. We'll talk about this. They signed Space Act, signed the Space Act with NASA for private orbital space flights. So we'll talk about that a little later on as well. They're talking about their future astronaut pool. I do have some concerns with that. That's what we'll get into before. Of course, if you followed me on Instagram, you saw their spaceship cabin reveal that they did on YouTube. And the biggest one, I think this is most interesting to me, is the high-speed point-to-point travel. So this is a concept vehicle for that high-speed vehicle, which I said could be, one of the most interesting things that they could do. They could actually generate a lot of income if they did it right. In terms of the test flights and the operational readiness from Spaceport America, you can pause here if you want. I won't go into this too much. Of course, they completed 8 flights in the second quarter. They're saying 6 flights from Spaceport America and 2 VSS Unity flights for glide flight testing. This slide gives you a little bit more information on the second glide flight that they had. You can actually watch the video if you go to their website or YouTube as well. Pause the screen here if you'd like to read some of these, but there's some interesting, notable information here that they're actually making some progress. In terms of the update for the FAA approval process, it's really interesting to see that they've gotten previously issued a launch license from the FAA. But right now they actually have 27 of the 29 elements. They cleared 3 new elements during the Q2, and this was related to the cabin humidity, vehicle landing gear, and environmental control systems. So obviously this is extremely important. I wouldn't expect them to be going forward if they didn't think they could get these things, but it's good to see that they're actually making progress on that. In terms of the build program, they talked about the scenario that we're in right now, slowing things down. So I don't think that following this timeline too close is extremely important. That's why I'm not going to go through the slide. There could be delays and stuff like that, but again, they're noting here that they're making progress on their second and their third vehicle. The space cabin reveal, you can pause here if you want. I would recommend that if you're interested in actually seeing this, and if you are an investor or you're interested in the company, just simply go to their YouTube channel and watch this. It's going to explain way more than what I can here. So again, if you want to see that, it looked pretty cool, but it was only a concept video, which I think a lot of people were extremely upset about. But if you want to see that, yeah, go to their YouTube channel, watch that. It's definitely something you need to see. In terms of their customer demand, so I think it's best to look at it from the right here. So they have, of course, their total addressable market here. They think about 2 million high net worth individuals. They have their one small step. These are the qualified prospects. This actually grew from last quarter. If you watch my last video, I think it was around 400. Now we have about 700. And one giant leap is actually the $1,000 deposits. They're saying they have approximately 600 customers, $80 million in deposits. And we're going to be talking about that. That's something specifically I want to talk about today. They also talk about here on the left about how they're the community now substantially exceeds the number of future astronauts, and different things like that. They're positive, but I like to actually see the numbers grow. The fact that they're saying the community now substantially exceeds the number of future astronauts, yeah, I guess that's good. But you want the future astronauts. You don't want just the people that are like, hey, I'm super interested. So I don't know what I think about that. But the second bullet point here, they said approximately 600 future astronauts as of July 30th, 2020, representing a total of approximately $80 million in deposits. Note here that I highlighted minimum refund requests from existing future astronauts. They say it's minimum, but this is where I see the concern coming in, and we're going to look at that when we get into the financials. But to me, that's almost kind of a little bit, I don't know, they put it in there, but it's almost a little bit, devious. Their second check mark here demonstrates strength and ongoing support of customer base. I would argue that right now, maybe we're seeing a little bit of weakness, but keep watching, guys. We're going to get into that. Now they're talking about their future growth areas. Of course, this, just looks amazing, this concept that they have right here. But before they get into that, they go into the Orbital Space Initiative update. This could be something good. They're saying that they continue the relationship with NASA on the Space Act agreement for private orbital space flight to the International Space Station. So they're saying that private orbital space flight largely driven by demand from existing customers. So essentially they're allowing private astronauts is what they call them. So they entered into deposit agreements for orbital space flights with 12 customers. Of course, this is going to be extremely more, probably extremely expensive, more expensive than the suborbital. This is actually the orbital, but they're saying that NASA recognizes the training applications being suborbital, going orbital, and so that was something that they talked about on their conference call. So this is something I'd watch closely going forward. And again, on August 3rd, they unveiled the high-speed vehicle concept here. So they're saying, you can see where I highlighted here, the basic parameters of the initial high-speed aircraft design include targeted Mach 3 certified delta wing aircraft. So they're saying this basically can get within, I can't quite remember now, I think it was within an hour or two of any really major area in Earth that's visited quite often. So that's what I'm saying. That could be huge for future travel. If we see future travel, of course, return, which I believe we will. The capacity for 9 to 19 people at an altitude of 60,000 feet. And they executed this non-binding agreement with Rolls-Royce to facilitate this further collaboration, they're saying, on the development of sustainable, cutting-edge propulsion systems for the aircraft. Of course, the Concorde was made by Rolls-Royce, and everybody thought that. I mean, that had its issues, but that's what has always fascinated me. So maybe we're going to see a repeat of that. And that partnership is amazing to me. So of course, on the last slide here, they kind of give you a visual representation of why they're the best. But I looked at it and I go, okay, that's great, force mover advantages and stuff. I like that. But at the very, very bottom, they kind of outlined in something that makes me a little bit more bullish. Their complementary capabilities, because now they have Boeing, NASA, and Rolls-Royce that they're collaborating with, so that gives them some validity there. And so that's my thoughts on that. Of course, these are their financial statements here now. I kind of went through these already, and when we went to the conference call, they just basically read off this. The only thing I'd like to note here is what I highlighted when they're saying the adjusted EBITDA, earnings before income taxes, dividends, and amortization. They like to give that, and they're adjusting that based on the fact of stock-based compensation. So if you want to know why those numbers are different or why they make them slightly better, they basically adjust for that. Now the income statement, it's pretty small income statement here. I pretty much had it represented on the board. But the one thing that I'd like to just reference here, that if you didn't listen to the conference call, that you should be aware of going forward, is that R&D. So they're saying right now, of course, it was $37 million for last quarter, up significantly. We expect that's going to be happening. But they're taking into account the building of their spacecraft, if I understand. So they're saying as soon as they have that second powered flight where they can demonstrate the viability of the aircraft, they're going to be moving that to capital expenditures. So you're going to see that line item change. So going forward, that's something that you should probably know. And going to the cash flow statement here, again, talking about stock-based compensation. This is only one thing that I didn't really like. $5.5 million versus 4.4. So the stock-based compensation is increasing, and I don't like to see that in a company that hasn't really demonstrated itself much. You're paying the executives and the CEO and all that. I understand they need to be compensated, but in the early years, I don't really like to see that. Now, the biggest thing here to me is this customer deposits. I'm going to show you this on the board as well. Maybe first I'll show it to you on the board. Okay, this DP here, DEP, is customer deposits. So as of Q2 2020, we had $81.734 million in those refundable deposits. Last quarter, we had $83.264 million. So since last quarter, they lost $1.53 million in deposits. And of course, that's what they were saying, minimal, people asking for refunds. And if you look back on the screen right here, when we're looking at the statement of cash flow, you can see that represented there. Customer deposits, 1.530 million. They actually have it on the cash flow statement there as a loss, cash coming out, because of course that's what happened. Of course, March 31st, the quarter before that, they had a $98 million loss, and then back on a year ago, it was actually a gain. Again, looking at the board here, you can see. So this quarter, 81.73 million, 83.26 million, and then since a year ago, it was down another 98,083. So they're losing people, they're losing deposits. So that's what's concerned me. We'll get back into that in just a little bit here. Let's continue looking at the statement of cash flows. Again, capital expenditures are going to increase. That's to be expected. And the net decrease or increase in cash, we saw a decrease of cash of $58.4 million this quarter. Of course, that's to be expected. So again, looking at these deposits, if you haven't found out the theme of what I think the reason for the stock is falling, I think that maybe a lot of retail investors don't notice this, because when you look at the presentation on another thing I feel is kind of devious. Don't dislike the video, guys. If you're long the stock, it's just something you should be aware of, that they don't have the balance sheet on their presentation. They just leave it out. And I had to go find the balance sheet, and you can see it kind of more clearly there that the deposits are dropping. They do show it in the statement of cash flows that they have. But then again, how many retail investors can really read that, a statement of cash flows? I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but to me it seems a little disingenuous, and I really don't like that. I mean, if you're in the growth stage where you're like, hey, we're growing, we're a growth company, be open, be honest, say what's happening if you have conviction in the company. It's just about being transparent. But anyway, so that's my number one thing that I think is driving the stock down. Of course, the revenue, and of course, cash, a little bit dropping as well. In terms of the balance, or in terms of the conference call here, again, like I said, their first power flight is this fall. They're hoping the second after that sometime, with 4 mission specialists to kind of figure out how they're going to go about things, and specifically figuring out how they're going to get Branson into space. And now this is being pushed back to Q1 2020 that's, I think, another big reason that the stock's down, because they were originally saying that's going to be this year. Of course, they're blaming on what's going on right now and stuff like that, but investors never take that too well. A good thing, payloads are saying for NASA, they're going to have this fall, so they're going to have modest revenue for next quarter, it looks like. So we're going to see a little bit. So that all depends if they can get up there and do those orbital flights. But they're going to be generating a little bit of revenue. They never talked about this in the conference call, but of course it was an item that I think came out the day after the earnings. Of course, to build cash, they're issuing shares, about 20.5 million of them. Correct. So they have a relatively low number of shares outstanding. So that's about 9% of the shares they have outstanding right now that they're issuing. So that's a significant dilution. If you don't know what much about dilutions and issuing stocks, of course, look back at my stock market basics videos where I explain it a lot. But just to give you a quick explanation, of course, when a company goes public, they issue a certain amount of shares, and then, of course, all the revenue that the company makes, earnings per share divides through all those people. So we all have a piece of that pie. But if you bring more people in, your piece of that pie diminishes. So technically, all things remaining equal, not, hoping that the stock price will increase from people buying the shares and stuff, the stock price should go down, especially in a significant dilution, but not always, right? Because people, if they're bullish on the company, they're going to buy it, they're going to bid it up, right? But that's always a negative, but in a growth company, it's going to happen, but that was pretty significant. And another huge, to me, no questions during the conference call. Cut it off. It's like, I don't mean to be really negative on the company, guys, but when you see the deposits dropping off, you see things that look like they're trying to almost not be completely transparent, and then they're like, hey, no, we're not going to answer any questions either. I don't like that at all. So again, I don't own a position right now. I thought about getting back in. Of course, you saw my other videos on space where I did just a quick evaluation on their own expectations in terms of what they can generate in the future. I think the stock is too high where it is right now, so that's why I'm not getting in. I was going to originally get in maybe around 10 or 15 if it dropped that low, but I don't like a lot of the stuff I've seen here. But again, guys, that doesn't mean that it's not going to skyrocket, and that doesn't mean in 20 years from now it's not going to do phenomenal, right? You always see this kind of negativity in growth companies, and I don't mean to be super negative or anything. I just think that people should be aware about this, and this is why I make these videos, is that I think a lot of people aren't aware of this, and people don't really do a deep dive. So, if you're long the company and you know all this stuff, that's good. So that's why you subscribe to this channel. That's why you like it, right? So anyway, going forward, I think the stock's going to pull back. It all depends on their timeline, and I think how they do going forward and keeping the promises. And I think the biggest thing that maybe institutions are looking at, rather than institutional investors or retail investors, is the deposits. That's got to grow. That's something I'd be watching very closely. So again, guys, don't forget to like the video, subscribe. Thanks so much for watching. Sorry that it took a little bit to get it out, but I wanted to do analyze a little bit, and give you my actual thoughts, my deep dive thoughts in the company. That's going to be it for today. See you in the next one.